All right. Well, hello, everyone. Hope you're all having a good week. Good start to July. Good start to Q3. Welcome to another edition of our ongoing conversations with some of the best and brightest minds in B2B marketing. Very excited to have with us today from VMware, Sameen Jiwani. Sameen, thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
So maybe just start just with a little update of like who you are, where you're from, just a little bit about your role and the kind of work you're doing at VMware.
For sure. So I recently graduated from Northeastern University in Boston. So I'm still based in Boston. And actually, as of Monday, I started a new role at VMware called the go-to-market associate for our multi-cloud team. And I was previously on demand execution and actually joined VMware on the Carbon Black security demand generation team. So it's been a little bit of a journey over the past year or so, but it's been nice to kind of stick it out at VMware.
Well, it's been a little journey for a lot of us over the last year or so. Definitely a little different. What's it
Yeah.
been like sort of being on that journey, sort of ramping up on in a new role, a new company early in your career, also in the midst of a pandemic? Like talk about the last year.
I think it was really odd, to be honest with you. I've been kind of having an out of body experience, mostly because I feel like I'm pretty used to, being in an office environment and you get to see everyone on the first day and you have all of your fun little nonverbal cues with me shaking my hands right now too. Um, and a lot of that just kind of like went out the window. So it was a lot of just like Zoom interviews and Zoom communication. So um, it's definitely been a huge adjustment. So I'm excited to like actually go into the office and get to see my coworkers. But I think that what's been interesting too is like our team kind of went to being pretty like local to being a lot more global based. And so I think that now it's just kind of, oh, okay, this is going to be quote unquote that new norm again.
Yeah.
It's definitely a challenge.
So talk a little bit about that team. Like you mentioned sort of the new role you have moving forward on the go-to-market team. Like what does the team look like? Who are some of your colleagues and what are sort of the responsibilities and things you guys are responsible for generating for VMware?
Yeah, so this go-to-market team in particular is very strategy based. So when we look at multi-cloud at VMware, it's this huge space that we really want to focus on and we're really excited about. And so this team gets to do a lot of that. I kind of am thinking about it in terms of like we connect with sales a little bit, and then we also get to connect with the demand side of things. So it's a lot of like merging and finding that balance between like what does the customer want and what can actually be done, and then also finding that space of like what actually needs to get done. We all want a lot of things, and I think it's great to want all of those things, but figuring out what's actually needed and what's going to be worthwhile in the long run is going to be really interesting.
Yeah, that will be definitely interesting. I think, as you sort of evolve into the role, what are you learning about sort of, the work that your marketing team does combined with your sales organization? So talk a little bit about that sales and marketing alignment piece and how important that is.
Yeah, so full disclosure, I'm on day 3 of the job, so it's a little bit, I've got a
Right.
lot to learn at this point. I think the biggest takeaway that I've had so far, even just in general too, right, is that concept of communication with sales. And so it's that constant communication and back and forth of making sure that everyone is on the same page, especially when you're talking about something as complex as like multi-cloud, or when you're just talking about really anything, especially when it comes to like software and infrastructure and things like that. You need to make sure that everyone kind of is understanding what the goals are, and also taking note of all of those different nuances, right? Sometimes you're going to have something, you're going to have a process, you're going to have something wonderful that's built out and it looks great on paper, and then you try and execute it across all of these different use cases, and it's not one size fits all. So finding those different spaces with sales.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. What are I mean, day 3 on the job. You've been with the company for a while. Day 3 on the job, like this happens a lot. Like a big company, small company, people change roles, people pivot a little bit. I know you're only
Yeah.
on day 3, but like for other people that are about to go through this process, what are your recommendations to start to get comfortable and oriented towards a new role to start being successful?
I think my biggest takeaway has always been to just be a massive sponge. So anything and everything that you can possibly learn, learn it. And I used to think that a lot of that was just kind of being pretty silent about it. But I think what I've at least learned over the past year is that ability to start asking questions. And especially when you start out now, like those questions are going to form that foundation that you're going to build off of. And I think the other thing is I've walked onto a couple of different types of teams, right? I've gotten on a team where someone has been like, you don't know anything, and maybe you just start out with like absolutely nothing. And that's totally, I think that's fair. And that's a really huge part of the mindset. But I also think on the flip side, like when you walk into the team, it's part of that, like understanding your value. And I think that sometimes that can be a challenge to do straight out of college. But understanding that your value is not just in the fact that you are a college student and you have very little experience, but it's also that you have had what little experience you've had. And so you have bits and pieces that you can kind of connect with. And so you need to find, I think it's been really helpful to find like anchor pieces, if you will. So I can relate to this by thinking about it in this way or with this metaphor or something that relates to my daily life. Especially when it comes to some of these topics, right? Some of it is just very abstract. And so finding ways to anchor those abstract concepts into something that feels real to you, and then building a foundation of questions.
I love that. It's really good advice. And I think it's good advice whether you've been 3 days, 3 months, or 3 years into the job, just to continue to sort of orient toward what's important and what's most impactful. No matter how long you've been on the job, I mean, there's a lot flying at us all the time: inboxes, fire drills, Slack messages, what have you. What are some of your strategies early in your career for separating the important from the urgent, like identifying the things that are most important to get done versus just all the fire drills and everything trying to get your attention?
I lean really heavily on my manager, to be honest with you. It'll be a Slack or a ping and be like, hey, this flew out of nowhere. Is this something that we need to prioritize? A lot of times it'll also be going back to like at the beginning of the quarter when we set all of our priorities. Does it fall into one of these categories and one of these boxes? And I think the biggest one is honestly just like day to day. I like to sit down and plan out my calendar and just see like, okay, this is the 30 minutes that I'm going to check my email. This is the 30 minutes that I'm going to work on X or Y. And it sometimes just comes down to, hey, I genuinely don't have enough hours in the day today to get this done. So if you need this to get done, then let's have a conversation about what needs to be rearranged. And so trying to set that like very clear time boundary, I think has helped with a lot of prioritization.
Yeah. I mean, that boundary and that discipline, I think, is really important. I mean, obviously, everyone has an opportunity to sort of go to your manager, go to your boss, to figure out what are the bigger priorities. But then we all have to go back to our desks and figure out how to spend the next half an hour, the next 2 hours. So having that, being self-disciplined around that, I think is like super, super important. I know, like, I asked this question to most people we do on this series, and I know you're fairly recently out of school, but if
Yeah.
you could talk to someone who's about to graduate, who's about to go into the market, into a marketing role, what advice would you give them that are things you have learned or experienced since you left school?
I think for like in general, the biggest thing is I know at least last year when I was looking for a job, right, my biggest concern was, oh my goodness, I'm going to graduate. I'm going to graduate into pandemic without a job. And I was like, then I took 3 steps back and it kind of realized that like that really could be okay because the biggest thing and most important thing was finding that team, finding that manager that you really connect with, and like the company where your values are really well in line with that space. I think that that's important because then it goes on to like step two, right, of being able to ask those questions and having that psychological safety and ability to grow. Um, and I think that when it comes down to marketing in particular, it's a really, really cool field to be in because everywhere you turn, there's something that you definitely did not know. There's an entirely new something or the other that's popping up. I know like marketing ops is just like entirely in its own revolution right now. But I also just recently learned the distinctions between like product marketing and go to market campaigns and consumer insights versus demand gen. But all of those different spaces all like kind of come together, and there's usually a common thread that weaves through them, and that's usually that like customer focus. And so I think it's really important to take the time to find the space where you are able to learn the most and really be able to experience everything that marketing has to offer.
Love it. All right, time for the lightning round. You ready? Quick
Yeah.
questions, quick answers. All right. First, favorite unsung tech tool in your marketing or sales technology stack? Why is it your favorite and why?
So I love using Smartsheets. I really just enjoy organization just to begin with. And so I think that Smartsheets has made it really easy to kind of organize. And also it gives me all of the like notifications and stuff that I need. So I think that's like tool. I will also say though, like when it comes down to MarTech, the people behind the tools, so anyone on the marketing ops team, those are the absolute unsung heroes of the entire industry. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I agree. We use Smartsheet as well. Love it. What's one sales or marketing pet peeve you have?
I am not a fan of like whenever we sit there and we look at data and we're like, we need to look at everything quantitative about this. My biggest pet peeve is when we don't take 3 steps back to consider all the qualitative effects. A lot of times that's just like emotions and things like that of the customer. And especially in B2B, it's sometimes hard to find that.
Yep. Love it. What's a guilty pleasure that you are proud of?
I'm a huge fan of making gigantic breakfasts and just taking like an hour and a half in the morning and just like doing it step by step and sitting down. And it's like a whole feast. It's wonderful.
That's great. Okay. Follow-up question. What is in your gigantic breakfast? What are the key stars of your gigantic breakfast?
Okay, so it depends on the day because I can't do the same thing like 2 days in a row.
Yeah.
But so I'll do like eggs and some form of protein. And then yesterday I did this like bagel with whipped cream cheese and like some honey and everything bagel seasoning and red chili flakes. Is so good. And then also just like either coffee or tea. And then I usually follow it up with like some kind of snacking after it. So.
Oh my gosh, you're making me hungry. That sounds amazing. All right. Last 2 questions in our lightning round. What is a key part of your morning, other than your amazing breakfast? What is a key part of your morning, get started, get going at work routine?
I go to SoulCycle every day. And that's pretty much
Every
it.
day. Wow, impressive.
Yeah.
All right. And similar question. What's a key part of your afternoon, evening, I am done with work routine?
I'm a huge fan of like separating out everything in physical spaces. So I will like shut down my laptop, close my chair, and walk away from the computer. And that's like when my day is done and over, and I will not go near it again.
Nice. I love that. Well, I know you're just recently out of school, but some pretty sage advice from our guest today, Sameen Jiwani, talking about taking care of yourself in the morning, both with SoulCycle and with a great breakfast, as well as making sure you're joining a company that isn't just good work, but great value fit as well and good culture fit. So, Sameen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's great to speak to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for watching. We'll see you next time.